Good evening and welcome to Short Ghost Stories Long After Midnight, a place where midnight chills come to life. Expect spine-tingling tales of ghosts and spirits, graveyards, haunted houses, and other creatures of the night. Turn off the lights and listen if you dare. She Comes by Candlelight. Wicklow Manor stood on the northern edge of Blackmere Hill, where the wind came low across the dead fields and pressed itself against the windows as though begging to be let inside. It had been built in the early years of the century, when fortunes were still made with ships, ledgers, tea, tobacco, timber, and silk. Its stones were blackened by age and rain, its chimneys rose like watchtowers into the grey sky, and its many windows reflected nothing but cloud, candlelight, and the skeletal trees that bent around the estate. Inside, the manor had once been warm. There had been music in the drawing room, fires in every hearth, and laughter beneath the great chandelier in the dining hall. Servants moved softly along the corridors. Silver was polished until it shone like water, and the red carpets were beaten clean each spring. Portraits of the Wicklow family lined the upper gallery, stern men and pale women looking down upon every visitor who passed beneath them. But by the autumn of 1887, that warmth had begun to fade. Edward Wicklow was dying. He sat most evenings in his study, wrapped in a heavy robe, his once powerful frame weakened by illness. His hair had gone white at the temples, and his hands, which had signed contracts across half the ports of Europe, now trembled slightly when he lifted a cup of tea. His wife, Lora Wicklow, sat beside him whenever she could. She was small, gentle, and already aged by worry. There had been no children, no young voices to inherit the house, no family to fill its rooms when the two of them were gone. Only the servants remained, and among them, the oldest and most trusted in appearance was the butler, Edgar Blackwood. One evening, as rain moved across the windows like dark fingers, Lora sat near Edward's chair and held his hand. "You must not look at me like that," Edward said softly. "Like what?" "As though I am already a ghost." Lora tried to smile, but it failed before it reached her eyes. "You are not to speak so." "My dear," he said, "I have traded with men who lied better than kings. And doctors are no different. I know when a man has been given polite words instead of hope." The fire cracked in the grate. Outside, the wind pressed against the glass. Lora lowered her head. "I cannot live in this house without you." Edward squeezed her hand with what strength he still possessed. "You can. You must. Wicklow Manor is yours now. Everything is yours. I have seen to it." She looked toward the dark shelves of books, the heavy curtains, the portrait of Edward's father above the mantel. "It is too large for one heart." "Then let it be a shelter for memory," Edward said, "not a tomb." At that moment, the study door opened with a quiet knock, and Edgar Blackwood entered carrying a silver tray. He was a tall, thin man in his late 60s, dressed always in immaculate black. His hair was iron grey, brushed back severely from a narrow face. His eyes were pale and watchful, and his manner was so precise that many mistook it for loyalty. "Your tea, sir," he said. Edward looked at him for a long moment. "Set it down, Blackwood." Edgar obeyed. Lora nodded kindly to him. "Thank you, Edgar." "My lady." He bowed, but his eyes moved briefly to Edward, then to the documents on the desk, then away. Edward saw it. When Lora left the room a little later to speak with the housekeeper, Edward remained by the fire. Edgar returned to collect the tray, and for some time neither man spoke. Then Edward said, "You have served this family nearly 40 years. I have, sir. And yet I have never known whether this house made you proud or resentful." Edgar's face did not change. "I hope I have never given cause for such a question." Edward leaned back in his chair. His breathing was shallow. "You give cause by hiding too well." The butler's fingers tightened around the edge of the tray. "I do not understand, sir." "No, I believe you understand perfectly." Edward's eyes remained fixed on him. "There is a hunger in you, Blackwood. I have seen it for years. You bow to wealth, but you hate those who possess it." Edgar lowered his gaze. "I am only a servant." "Yes," Edward said, "and that has poisoned you." For one instant the old butler's expression hardened. It was gone almost at once, covered again by duty and silence. Edward continued, "You will receive your pension, fairly and generously, but nothing more. This house belongs to Lora after me, not to you, never to you." Edgar bowed slowly. "As you wish, sir." Edward looked toward the fire. "No, Blackwood, as is right." The butler collected the tray and left the study without another word. 3 nights later, Edward Wicklow died. It happened shortly after midnight. A storm had rolled over Blackmere Hill, shaking the shutters and sending rain down the glass in silver streams. Lora woke to find her husband sitting upright beside her, one hand pressed against his chest. "Edward." He turned toward her, and for one brief moment, the old strength returned to his face. "Lora," he whispered. She caught him before he fell. By dawn, the house knew. The bell at the chapel rang 6 times. The servants moved through the manor with lowered heads. Edgar Blackwood stood at the foot of the staircase, solemn and still, watching as Edward's body was carried down beneath a white sheet. Lora followed behind. She did not cry loudly. That would have been easier. Instead, she seemed to shrink into herself, as if part of her had been buried before the funeral had even begun. The funeral was held beneath a sky the colour of ashes. Merchants came from London. Former captains stood at the back of the chapel. Farmers from the estate removed their hats as Lora passed. Edward Wicklow had been a wealthy man, but he had also been a decent one, and that is rarer. When the will was read, everything passed to Lora. The manor, the fortune, the investments, the land. Edgar Blackwood received a pension, respectable but modest. He stood in the shadows of the room while the solicitor spoke, his hands folded neatly before him. No one noticed his face. No one saw how cold it became. In the weeks that followed, Wicklow Manor sank into grief. Lora stopped taking meals in the dining room and instead sat in the smaller parlour near the fireplace. She wore black every day. She spoke little. The house, once maintained like a proud vessel, became heavy with dust and silence. Edgar attended her constantly. At first, he seemed gentle. He brought her tea. He read letters aloud when her eyes were tired. He reminded her of estate matters, of signatures, of obligations, of things Edward had once handled without troubling her. "You must forgive me, Edgar," she told him one evening. "I am not fit for accounts and papers." "No apologies needed, my lady," he said. "You are grieving. Such burden should not fall upon you now." "You are very kind," he bowed his head, but behind his lowered eyes something cruel smiled. The opportunity came in December. Snow lay thin upon the grounds, and the trees looked like black veins against the moonlit fields. Lora sat beside the parlour fire, wrapped in a shawl, her face pale in the candlelight. On the table beside her stood a glass of sherry, untouched. Edgar entered with a leather folder beneath his arm. "My lady," he said softly, "there are a few estate formalities requiring your signature." She looked up wearily. "Tonight? I fear they concern deadlines. Your late husband had begun certain arrangements before his passing. Nothing troubling, merely administrative." Lora closed her eyes. "I trust you, Edgar. You have been with this house longer than many marriages last." "Yes, my lady." He laid the papers before her. The firelight flickered across the ink. She tried to read the first page, but the letters swam before her tired eyes. "What is this?" "Authority for management of certain holdings," Edgar said. "It allows matters to proceed without burdening you personally." And Edward approved this? "In principle, my lady." It was almost the truth. Almost. Lora looked toward Edward's empty chair. "He always understood such things better than I did." "He wished you to be spared distress," Edgar said. The room was warm, but his voice made it colder. She signed the first paper, then the second, then the third. Her hand trembled by the final page. Edgar gently placed the pen between her fingers. "Just there, my lady," Lora signed. For several seconds Edgar did not move. Then he gathered the papers with great care, closed the folder, and bowed. "You have done well, my lady." Something in the way he said it made her look up. For the first time in all those years, she did not see the servant. She saw the man beneath. The weeks that followed revealed the crime slowly, like a stain spreading beneath wallpaper. Letters came. Accounts were transferred. Servants began receiving instructions from Edgar rather than Lora. The solicitor arrived twice and would not meet her eyes. When Lora demanded an explanation, she was told that she had signed over broad authority and ownership to Edgar Blackwood. "No," she whispered. "No, I did no such thing." The solicitor cleared his throat. "The documents bear your signature, Mrs. Wicklow." "I was deceived." Edgar stood near the window, looking out at the winter garden. "My lady is confused," he said gently. "Grief has taken a terrible toll." She turned on him. "You did this." He looked at her with polite sorrow. "I have done nothing but serve. You stole from Edward." At that, Edgar's expression darkened. "Edward left me scraps. He saw you clearly." "And what did he see?" Edgar asked, his voice suddenly sharper. "A man who gave 40 years to this house. A man who rose before dawn and slept after midnight. A man who watched fools inherit what they never earned." Lora stared at him. "You were trusted. I was used. You were welcomed. I was kept beneath the stairs." There was silence. The fire hissed softly. Then Lora said, "You are poorer than any beggar I have ever seen." Edgar stepped closer. "And yet, my lady, I now own Wicklow Manor." Something inside her broke. By spring, Lora Wicklow was a ghost before death ever claimed her. The servants whispered that she walked the upper gallery at night carrying a single candle, speaking softly to Edward's portrait. Sometimes she sat in the dining room at the long table, staring at the empty place where her husband had once sat. One night, the housekeeper found her beneath the great staircase, looking upward into the darkness. "Mrs. Wicklow." Lora did not turn. "He is not gone," she whispered. "Edward is only waiting somewhere I cannot reach." The next morning she was found dead. Some said poison, some said she had fallen, some said she had simply walked out of life as one walks out of a cold room. The official report was brief. The manor observed no true mourning. Edgar saw to that. He dismissed half the staff within the month. He moved into Edward's study. He wore Edward's velvet smoking jacket in the evenings. He drank Edward's brandy beneath Edward's portrait, raising his glass to the painted face with a thin smile. "You underestimated me," he said one night. The portrait gave no answer. At first, Edgar enjoyed everything. He dined alone at the great table, surrounded by silver and crystal. He ordered new curtains from London, though they arrived smelling faintly of damp. He had the master bedroom prepared for himself, though the servants refused to sleep anywhere near that wing. Then the manor began to change, not all at once. The rot came quietly. The red carpets darkened as though soaked by old rain. The wallpaper peeled in corners that had been dry for decades. Mirrors tarnished overnight. Candle flames leaned away from empty doorways. Portraits seemed altered in their frames, their faces thinner, their eyes more watchful. At night, the corridors grew impossibly long. Edgar dismissed every complaint. "Old houses settle," he snapped. But Wicklow Manor did not settle. It listened. The first full moon after Lora's death rose pale and enormous behind the clouds. Edgar woke shortly after midnight. At first, he did not know why. Then he heard footsteps, slow, soft, a woman's shoes moving along the corridor outside his room. He sat upright in bed. "Who is there?" The footsteps stopped. A line of candlelight appeared beneath the door. Edgar stared at it, his throat tightening. "Mrs. Vale," he called, though he had dismissed the housekeeper days earlier. No answer. He climbed from the bed and crossed the room. The floorboards were bitterly cold beneath his feet. When he opened the door, the corridor was empty, but the air smelled of candle wax. On the floor, leading away toward the staircase, were small white drops of melted wax. Edgar did not sleep again that night. The next full moon was worse. He heard humming from the gallery. It was the tune Lora had once played on the piano while Edward read by the fire. Edgar followed it with a lamp in his hand, anger fighting fear in his chest. "This is childish," he muttered. "Some servant's trick." The humming stopped. At the far end of the gallery stood a woman in black. She held a candle in one hand. Her face was hidden beneath a veil. Edgar's lamp flickered. "Who are you?" The figure raised her head. The veil lifted though no wind touched it. Her face was Lora's, but not as he had known it. The skin was stretched pale and tight. Her mouth was dark. Her eyes were black from corner to corner, as though grief had burned them hollow. Edgar stumbled back. No, the candle flame did not move. The figure whispered, "Thief." He ran. After that, the manor became his prison. Every full moon, she returned. Sometimes she appeared reflected in mirrors behind him. Sometimes he woke to find candle wax on his pillow. Sometimes he heard Edward's voice from the study, low and sorrowful, speaking words he had once said in life. "I saw you clearly, Blackwood. Edgar began covering the portraits with sheets. By morning, the sheets had fallen. He locked the doors. By midnight, they stood open. He ordered lamps lit in every room. By the full moon, only candles burned. Servants would no longer stay. One maid fled, screaming, after seeing a woman in black standing at the foot of her bed, holding a candle above her own dead face. A groom refused to enter the stable after hearing someone whisper his name from inside an empty carriage. Soon, Edgar was alone. Alone with the house. Alone with what he had earned. He drank heavily. He stopped shaving. His fine clothes hung loose from his frame. He muttered to himself as he moved through the rooms, carrying pistols, keys, lamps, religious charms, anything he believed might keep the dead from crossing the threshold. But the dead had never respected thresholds. On the final night, the full moon rose red. A storm had gathered over Blackmere Hill, shaking the manor with thunder. Rain lashed the windows. The old trees scraped against the walls like fingernails. Edgar sat in Edward's study with a bottle of brandy beside him and a pistol on the desk. Every candle in the house had been extinguished. He had made certain of it. Then, at midnight, they all lit at once. From the study, Edgar saw the corridor flare with trembling gold. One candle, then another, then another. Down the hall, up the staircase, along the gallery, the entire manor awakened in candlelight. Edgar rose slowly. "No," he whispered. From above came footsteps, descending, measured, patient. He took the pistol and stepped into the corridor. The candles burned with tall, still flames. Their light did not warm the walls. It revealed them, the rot, the blackened corners, the portraits with faces twisted in silent accusation. At the top of the staircase stood Lora Wicklow, not the grieving widow, not the pale woman from the gallery. Something older now, something made from betrayal, grief, and the cold justice of the grave. Her body was tall and shadowed, wrapped in black folds that moved like smoke. In one hand, she carried a silver candle holder with 3 flames. Her face was partly human, partly hollow darkness. Behind her, the air bent and trembled. Edgar raised the pistol. "Stay back." Lora descended 1 step. 40 years, she said. Her voice was not loud, but the whole house seemed to speak with it. Edgar's hand shook. "I gave my life to this place. You were given shelter. I was given commands. You were given trust." "I was forgotten," he cried. "Your husband left me nothing." Laura's black eyes fixed upon him. "Edward left you exactly what your soul deserved." Edgar fired. The shot cracked through the manor. The bullet passed through her and struck the wall behind, shattering the portrait of Edward Wicklow. For a moment the house went silent, then every candle flame turned black. Edgar backed away. "I earned it," he whispered. "I earned all of it." Lora came lower down the stairs. "You stole from a grieving heart. You would have wasted it. You murdered what grief had not yet taken. I did not kill you." At this, Lora stopped. Her face changed. For one terrible instant, she looked almost as she had in life, wounded, gentle, unbearably sad. Then the sadness burned away. "No," she whispered. "You only opened the door." The walls began to groan. The chandelier above the staircase swayed, though no wind entered the hall. Edgar fell to his knees. "Mercy." Lora leaned over him, her candlelight falling across his ruined face. "Did you offer mercy when my hand trembled over your papers?" He sobbed. "I was angry." "Did you offer mercy when I begged you to undo what you had done?" I was owed something. You were owed truth. The candles flared higher. Lora's shadow climbed the walls until it filled the staircase from floor to ceiling. Edgar covered his face. What do you want? The ghost bent close. What is mine? The lights went out. The scream that followed was heard in the village below, though the storm was loud enough to drown church bells. By morning, the rain had stopped. 2 men from Blackmere village came to the manor after seeing candlelight burning in every window through the storm. They found the front door open. Inside, the air was freezing. The candles were gone, all except 3, melted down to pale stumps beneath the grand staircase. There, hanging from the upper railing by a rope, was Edgar Blackwood. His face was twisted in such terror that neither man dared look at him for long. No chair lay beneath his feet. No ladder stood nearby. Only candle wax. And on the wall behind him, burned into the wallpaper, was the shape of a woman holding a candle. Wicklow Manor was abandoned within the year. No heir claimed it. No buyer kept it. Those who entered after sunset heard footsteps above them and a woman's voice asking softly whether the papers were ready to sign. The manor still stands on Blackmere Hill. Its windows are dark most nights, but when the moon is full, travellers sometimes see candlelight moving slowly through the upper corridors, and if they stop long enough, they hear 2 sounds from within. A woman humming beside the staircase, and an old man somewhere in the dark, begging her not to come any closer. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed tonight's short ghost story, consider leaving a comment. Feel free to like and share. And subscribe for more short ghost stories long after midnight.